Okay, Mike, we got the Longacres Mile coming up, a race you know very well here on the Northwest. Before we get into the 3 horses that you plan to enter into the Longacres Mile, let's go back in history a little bit and let's talk about Taylor Said and you getting your first Longacres Mile. What do you remember the most about that day?
Just the feeling when they crossed the finish line that he actually won, and it was a great feeling because you know, growing up and you know, just the history and how much I love racing up here, to me that was like winning the Kentucky Derby. So it was just a great feeling, especially you know, dealing with Troy, Taylor and Glenn, Todd. You know, we have a really good team. You know, we trade back and forth, and just that feeling that we all won it together was really exciting.
You're a Seahawks fan. I got an analogy for you. Glenn Todd, Dr. Mark DiDomenico, they're like the Paul Allen, and Troy Taylor and Mike Puhich are like the John Schneider and Pete Carroll. What's the war room like with the 4 of you guys when you guys have a plan of attack for a race like the Longacres Mile?
Well, I would guarantee you that it probably doesn't make as much sense as the war room and the Seahawks war room. We have a lot of fun and bounce a lot of crazy ideas off of each other, but at the end of the day, the final thing that we come up with is usually a pretty good combination and a winning one. So it's working for us, so it's fun. But you know, if anybody tape recorded any of our meetings, they'd think these guys are absolutely crazy.
Well, you guys certainly seem to be very interested in the Longacres Mile. You've nominated quite a few over the last couple of years for this year. What makes the Longacres Mile such an interesting race for you guys to try to attack?
Well, you know, we're all from here. You know, Dr. Mark, go back to Dr. Mark, grew up on the rail at Longacres, and Glenn Todd grew up on the rail at Longacres, and that race is just a race. You got 2 guys that can play hardball with probably anybody in the country, and probably more than anybody in the country when they team up, and they're keying up on this race more than you would be for the Breeders' Cup, you know. So it's just the history of the race, and it's why it's such a great race. It's our local Kentucky Derby, you know, and it's a fun race, and we know it's a really hard race to win. You know, we're taking 3 shots, and I'd be considered lucky if we hit the board with one of them. You know, that's how hard a race it is to win and to be competitive, and you have to be completely lucky, have a perfect trip, and a good horse on top of it. So the more the better. I know, you know, if it were a 14-horse field, if Mark and Glenn had their way, we would have 12 of the entries and 2 on the eligible, you know, so.
They want it that bad. Well, if you look at a couple of your horses, let's start with Mr. Bowling. I think the most interesting storyline for him is that this is kind of maybe a chance at redemption. I think Mr. Bowling went into last year's Longacres Mile very sharp. I had heard that there had been some great workouts, but then he breaks slow out of the gate, and it's kind of all lost there from the outside post. Talk a little bit about what you saw from that race and how excited you are to get him back to try it again this year.
Well, you know, everything was exactly like you said up until the last race I ran him, and I think I made a pretty bad mistake coming back. He'd run you know, we got him in a couple of sprint races here, and that's not his forte, and he ran 2 nice sprints, and then we routed him, and he ran a really nice second, and then shipped him up 2 weeks later in Canada. He jumped up and beat title contender, ran a monster race, and then to bring him right back in 2 weeks, I don't think was the smartest thing I could have done with him. And he had no excuses, except I think that he just bounced that day. But that being said, it was either run him there or train him for 6 or 8, I think it was 7 weeks before the mile. So I thought, you know what, he's doing good, let's run him, but I really think he bounced. I think he's right where I want him to be right now. And I really do think he's going to redeem himself. I think he's going to run I think the real Mr. Bowling will show up. Whether he's good enough, I don't know, but I'll be disappointed if he doesn't make some serious noise.
One of the interesting horses that you guys now have going into Longacres Mile is a horse by the name of Prohibition. How did it come about that you guys acquired such a pretty nice horse?
Well, I was back at the Fassig-Tipton sale. It was the horses in training sale, horses of racing age. There was a bloodstock agent that we use that finds a lot of horses for us named Christina Jelm, who pointed him out to me and said, here's a horse in this sale you might want to look at. And I'm like, oh, we got our mile horses. And then I started looking at the PPs on him, and I went and watched a couple tapes on him, and I thought, you know, this horse would be real, his best race makes him a real contender out there, and we spent a lot more money than he's going to bring in the sale trying to get horses here to win this race. So it just kind of fell into place, and I'm really glad we did it. I think he's going to be kind of the dark horse, so to speak. He's one that if he won the race and you didn't like him, but you go back and look at his PPs and say, well, we should have played him. He had the form, you know, he had the buyers, he had everything. And he's trained brilliantly at the farm. We've got him in here. See how he does Monday's his last prep before the mile, and if he breezes as good as I think he will, comes out of it as good as he goes into it, then he's another one that's going to be a serious player.
Looking at Prohibition's running style, and now that you've had him for a few weeks now, what do you see in terms of maybe tactics that will be used in the Longacres Mile?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because he looks like the type of horse that when he did win and won by daylight, he looked like he kind of had his own way early in the race, and that's definitely not going to be the case in the mile. I liked his last start where he laid off the pace and made a nice run, and he was beaten by some pretty quality horses, but only beaten 3 lengths, but he looked like he settled off the pace fine. In the mile, with all 3 of my horses that are in there, the instructions are going to be to send them away from the gate the first 100 yards and then see where you're at, and because you have to have good position, and that doesn't mean you have to quarter horse and be the lead, but they're going to understand they're going to get away from there, be in good position, and if somebody stubs their toe or something and somebody falls out on the lead on their own, then that's even better yet. But I think that's a real hard race to win wire to wire, but it's also a hard race to win if you're not in good position when you come out of that clubhouse turn.
The third horse we have to talk about is Jabrika, a horse that everyone knows very well here on the Northwest Racing Circuit, and you guys saw enough in him that you wanted to bring him over to your barn and claimed him out of his last race. What were your thoughts going for the claim, and then what have you seen from him since you've had him in your barn? You know,
it's again that war room where things, if it makes sense, we don't do it, and if it doesn't make sense, we do it. But it's more or less that's that horse there. He's the type of horse that if he doesn't win the mile, you could make a case that he could have won a couple miles. And if somebody, again, stubs their toe or whatever, he shows up every time. And last year, he had probably the worst trip you could imagine in the mile and came from last and only got beat 3 lengths. So we just kind of liked, Glenn's always liked that horse, and it was like, you know what, this is a perfect race for this horse. He's in for 50. This will set him up perfect for the mile if he comes back good. And if he doesn't, we got a nice horse on our hands, and we'll have some fun with him regardless. But from what I've seen of him so far, there are no reasons to think that we're going for the mile with him. He seems perfect. He was in great shape when we got him. Jim Penny did a great job with him. I'm sure they're probably disappointed to lose him, but that's the game. And hopefully we can keep him as happy as he was the day he ran last time out that the Pennies did, and if we do, he's going to be right there as well.
So let's talk a little bit about riders. Have you guys gotten to the point yet where you've decided about riding assignments for each of your runners?
I think we're going to go with Mario on Mr. Bowling for sure. He ran really well for him up at Hastings Park. And right now, Isaias Enriquez is probably going to ride Prohibition. I'm sorry, I've had a horse called Prohibiting. And we're undecided on Jabrika as of right now. But that can change. We might flip-flop. Again, you're going back to a crazy war room. So
Gary Stevens could come out of retirement and be on one of them.
Gary would love to, he saw we claimed Jabrika and said he'd love to be, if he would come ride that horse if he could ride him.
Well, that'd be great. And the last thing I want to know is, what are you going to be doing on mile day, from getting up in the morning? Any superstitions? What's kind of your feel from the start to what's going to be a very busy day for you?
Yeah, it'll be a really busy day. It'll be probably nerve-wracking, and but we have a lot of people coming into town, and you're putting everybody away and getting everybody taken care of. So it goes by fast, especially the group of people we have are so much fun to be around, and so it'll go by fast. It'll be fine.
Well, I want to wish you the best of luck with all 3 of your runners, and I hope you're looking forward to Longacres Mile like we are.
Without a doubt, man, without a doubt.
All right, thanks, Mike.
You bet.